Welcome to Girl on the Gov, the podcast, breaking down politics as we know it and removing all the bullshit.
Because politics needed a rebrand.
Well, here we are. Welcome back to Girl on the Gov, the podcast. Thanks for being here. It's a dark one. It's a heavy one. And it is, it's weird because it's one we've been anticipating. But having it be real has been wild. It's been a wild couple days. I don't know what to say. Do you?
No. You know what? I was trying to figure out, what made it feel so, holy shit kind of vibe. Since we have been talking about this for time immemorial, we knew this was coming. Yeah. We've been working with people knowing this was coming, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what was it? And I think part of it is that so many people that are typically unengaged, and this is not a swipe at them, it's not my intention, but so many of them, whether they're our friends, whether there's other people we know peripherally and we see on social media, they had swift and strong reactions, which is great. I hope you do to this news. Absolutely. But I think that was almost overwhelming to process, other people not realizing that this was in the wings for so long, and being shoot, them panicking. It didn't make me necessarily panic. I don't think it made you panic either, but it made it almost so much more.
No, that's so funny you say
exhaust stress combo. I don't know what it was.
No, it's
there was
weird. There's this just energy in the air because everyone is so rattled by this, as they should be. But it's weird, when you work in the space and you know that this has been coming, and have been talking to people for months and months and months about how this has been coming. But when there's just this collective, super large collective energy of people being so rattled and so scared and so angry. Yeah, it's weird because I didn't initially feel that reaction because, again, I've been expecting this. My mom, love you. She called me crying the morning of. I'm I was sitting there yep, it's real. And yeah, it's weird. But at the same time, I think because, at least on my end, because this has been expected, to see the outpour from people has been a little bit of a, I would, not relief, but it's just been energizing. To see people, rising up and because for months now, I've known it's been happening, but nobody's cared or nobody's been as outraged as they are right now. And so there is this energizing feeling of well, we're not going to change this tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. It's going to take years to recover from this, but I'm hoping that people stick with it and actually,
I think that's another element of it, of sort of the is not just the last few months of this very specific impending result and whatnot, but I think it's the years going up to it too. Yeah, it's all the people, specifically
RBG dying,
that have literally been mourning for years that this was going to happen, and have been literally fighting for this, and no one listening. And then in the same light of everyone in 2016 that was oh no, it won't be that bad. Here we are, and I think there's just so much of that shock from people somehow still. And I think maybe it's for us to not get too jaded working in the space and getting closer and closer, and the more work we do, the more I think it can get frustrating to see people not understand something. So I think it's definitely on us to not get so jaded that we don't understand a perspective of that evolution of getting more engaged, because there's definitely points where I wasn't as engaged, and I've definitely gotten more, understand levels of it through our conversations with people, through the work that we do. So I think there's that's super important, but very long way of saying that there have been points in time, like in 2020, where there were outpourings on the streets. There's a women's march, etc., which is great when we have these big symbolic moments, but they have to have action after them. And I definitely really worry that there's going to be sort of a big peak and then a big
Well, there always is.
Not plateau, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And there always is. And I think that's what it's just crazy when all this kind of shit happens, even if it's like a mass shooting as bad as like Uvalde or something. Like, you know, people in power like sit there and they're like, okay, let the rage happen, let it pass, and then they just like go on their merry way. Some advice, I guess, for that part of it, if you are a listener and you like are so outraged and like want to take action, we will give you some action items. I also would like say though, we can't also treat this the way we've treated a lot of different, I guess, just really monumental moments like we've been talking about, like a really bad mass shooting. Like the outpour right now is great and it needs to keep going, but the other thing is like we need stamina on this issue, and we need, and like
1000%,
and in order to get stamina and like the endurance to take this and like go with it as long as we can and like work until we actually get where we need to be and like make the change, like you do need to like take care of yourself and like make sure that, you know, you're not burning yourself out too quickly with this issue, because it's really heavy and it's like tough. And I think there's something to be said about making sure you're like keeping a balance and taking care of yourself. There's so many things that you can do every day that are like really small that you can like mix into your day-to-day schedule, like your work checklist, like email fucking Nancy at HR, and then right after that call you know,
Nancy,
Joe Manchin,
poor Nancy,
Joe Manchin's like office, you know, like there's little things that you can do that are super small moments of your day that, you know, collectively, if we all do them, can make a huge difference. There's just tons to do, is my point. And then the other thing is that like also make sure like you're keeping a balance in your life and being able to like take a step back, take a breather, like detach, so that you can still do this like every day, because that's what it's going to take, you know.
It's definitely an everyday thing. And I think one other thing along those lines is that some of this, if you've been along for the journey of Girl on the Gov, you've definitely learned about the state element in all of this with us. And if you haven't, definitely go and listen to our episode with the States Project, because that's going to, I would say that's going to jumpstart what I'm about to say and the learning that you need. But this whole thing is going to require you to get a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe uncomfortable is the wrong word, but learn about systems that are in your backyard that you didn't even know about, because that's what knowing how those work, knowing how your state and local governments work, is going to be a huge part of making change incrementally and across the board. There's going to be a level of learning that's going to need to be done in order for you to properly take action. And I want to lead right into an action item with that, which is knowing who your state and local reps are. So one action item that you can start with is going to openstates.org. You can search for your local reps. They're going to show you state assembly. They're going to show you state senate. They're going to give you the 4-in-1 on who those reps are. And those reps are super, super vital for making state laws, like those laws around abortion, around reproductive rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the ones you're going to want to, on that same page on openstates.org, another action item, you're going to want to check out what legislation they've been into. What have they been getting into? What have they been voting on or not voting on or skipping votes on? You're going to want to check. And, of course, the ones that you're like, wow, okay, they're standing up. They're figuring it out, or they have been. Great. Support their campaigns for re-election if that feels right to you. Check out all of the other people running, if they are, again, in a re-election situation. And if on the opposite end, you discover that there is someone in office, one of those positions, that is on the wrong side of this, vote them out. Let's add one more action item to this. You can see who is a pro-choice candidate by going to voteprochoice.org or checking out their Instagram. And they also have, of course, in link in bio, all of that good stuff for figuring out which candidates up and down the ballot are pro-choice. They're going to have a voter guide that comes out a little bit later this summer. Of course, we'll do a run-through of that on whether TikTok, Instagram, you know the deal, when that does go live. But go check out their website for now. That's going to give you that intro to it all.
Yes. Other action item is who we just always are shouting out.
Classic.
Love of my life, Brian Derrick. And he is like literally a fundraising guru. I can't even believe how amazing he is. He's raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in like a day. But the other thing to note is that he's raising money to really, really important elections or campaigns across the country. And they're just like very specific targeted donations that will actually be impactful, because oftentimes people don't know exactly strategically where is the best place to donate their money. And it's very important that you do donate strategically, because I don't think you should be, sending $6 to the DNC, because Lord knows that ain't gonna do anything. But again, there are races and elections and candidates like attorneys general. Go listen to our episode with Dana Nessel, that are so important when it comes to reproductive rights and protecting them, and that we need to make sure that we are aware of what those positions do, and that we are donating and supporting and uplifting pro-choice candidates up and down the ballot. And so Brian does a really good job at showing you who are the best people to donate to strategically, who can win, who can have impact, and who can protect reproductive rights. So he does all that work for you, and you can just send your little 1 to 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 500, whatever you want dollars to these really crucial elections. So go check him out. You can follow him at Brian Derrick. He also has a newsletter that has all of this, and then he'll give you all the links of where to donate. So go check him out.
Yeah, he is obviously an icon. If funds donating is not your speed, or you don't have any to spare, do not fear, because another way that you can support candidates is, of course, volunteering for them, or, and this is my personal favorite, is supporting them on social and helping them grow their social profiles. Save posts, like posts, send them to your friends. Maybe even send, what would actually be a good one of this? Make a group chat, if you don't already have one, with your friends on IG, and send stuff back and forth. Create engagement on the posts for candidates that really matter, that really need your support. That helps them, helps their engagement, helps them grow. So think of it like you would support a small business, you're supporting a candidate. Same kind of mentality.
TikToks too. So yeah, love the social moment. Such a 2022 Gen Z moment. Ooh. And it's just a great Gen Z action item.
And to that point, also, one particular piece of legislation. I was about to say legislato, and I don't think that's even a word in any language, so it's
Sounds
fine.
Like a gelato flavor. I don't know.
Okay, well, now I want gelato.
No, me too.
Now I want gelato. Specifically mint chip.
I was going to say it's specifically an espresso or coffee flavor, hopefully with some caffeine boosted in there, because Lord knows I need it.
Anyways, different action item is the Women's Health Protection Act. So. Okay, so the filibuster needs to go toodaloo for this to happen. This is the strategy right now, which is calling, texting, emailing, etc., DMing,
posting on your story, tagging these senators, and talking shit.
Not only talking shit, but I want to give everyone a few phone numbers. Save these in your contacts while you're at it, by all means. Joe Manchin, D.C. office, 202-224-3954. Kyrsten Sinema, 202-224-4521. Susan Collins, 202-224-2523. Wow, I literally sound like I'm doing the what's that thing?
QVC again.
QVC. That, but what's the thing where you bet money for this lottery? I sound like a lottery person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elisa Murkowski, 202-224-6665.
Not her having 666 in her phone number. Just saying. I'm just kidding.
I'm dead.
Guys. Also, this is all on an Instagram post on Girl in the Gut
a few of
podcast. A few of them. Also, in that caption, there is actually a little spiel you can say on the phone if you don't know what to say. It's a little funny, but at the same time, it'll work.
We're sassy. We're sassy, and we like it.
Tell them that you are their boss, and like we said in the caption, we'll hand you the fucking pink slip. Okay. Good deal. We're just ready to tussle over here. Also, just our TikTok is also doing the most right now, so go check it out. And we'll keep doing the most because we need to. And here we are. But those are some of our action items. We will keep pouring these all over the place and finding new ones and finding resources and being here with all of that for you guys. Also, DM us if you have questions, but also if you have voting questions. There's primaries today, so obviously this is falling on election year and we need to vote about it, so get ready. Sam.
There's birds.
Oh God, she's recording outside again. That's why you hear birds in the background.
Birds. Oh my
But
God, he's looking at me. He's looking.
I don't. Is it a pigeon?
Uh-huh.
Fun fact: Samantha thought that pigeons were exclusively a New York thing, a New York City thing. Actually, let me clarify. When we were in LA together, she literally saw a pigeon and goes, "There's pigeons here." And I'm not even joking. She is the second friend of mine from New York City who has said that to me. She also thought squirrels, or was that you?
Yes, me too.
No, like they both also thought squirrels were exclusively a New York City thing, and it's just, you guys need to get your head out of your asses,
See,
okay? The world doesn't revolve around you.
No, I'm kidding.
The main character energy that exudes from New York City, it just needs to be tamed.
We can't help it. But yeah, my head is so far up my ass, it's touching my head all at the same time. It's like a big circle.
Mm-hmm.
However,
infinite loop. But we are going to introduce you to our guest because we have an amazing guest today who does amazing, amazing work. She's here to talk about this overturn of Roe. I know everyone is looking for answers right now, and she's an amazing guest to give us those. So, Samantha, would you like to introduce our guest?
I would love to. As Betty said, we have an amazing guest today. Gretchen Sisson, Sociologist PhD, is joining us to talk about, of course, the overturning of Roe and her work in this space. We will be talking about particularly interesting but angle, avenue, argument in this space. And that actually is the argument sort of from the Republican side, the quote-unquote pro-life, aka forced birth side, which is the adoption of it all. So we'll be getting into that, as well as her work to elect progressive women, to get them to run for office. So we are gonna jump into it all. But anyways, without further ado, here is Gretchen. We are going to get into it. This is going to be quite the episode, quite the discussion. We are super excited. We know you wear many, many hats. Like, I think you might need a coat and also hat closet at this point for like all the like things.
I might. I have to be careful which ones I'm wearing too. If I'm talking about like my work or if I'm talking about politics, I have to make sure to switch. So I might have to switch mid-interview if we're talking about that. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, just let it flow on this one. We'll talk about it all.
A hat for every occasion, and sometimes you can wear more than one. Maybe we'll just have one of those. You stack them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a vibe. We're here for it. But nonetheless, you are a researcher at Advancing New Standards at the University of California, San Francisco. And before we get into the full extent of today's conversation, we do want to know a little background info. You know, how did you get into this work? What made you say, you know what, this is what I want to study, this is what I want to be researching and really getting into?
Yeah, so I don't think that you can like go to graduate school and say, I want to have my job studying what I study, because it's so specific and no one would think that you could actually get a job doing that. But I will say that I'm a big believer in like really following your interests, even if they don't always seem like they're going to come together. And you might end up with, like you said, a whole closet full of hats, but you know, they're all going to sort of help and reinforce each other. You know, and I grew up in a family that was fairly politically active, and my mom worked at Planned Parenthood before I was born. This is something that we were always really comfortable with. And, you know, when I sort of came into my own activism and my own time in college, I had a lot of focus on studying women's lives and stories. That was really compelling to me. And that's probably the most unifying thing for all of my work, is really the desire to advance women's voices and center those in politics, in policy, in our government, and really looking to that as a way to make a better world. So that's really kind of what brings me to where I am now. I ended up going to graduate school for sociology, and I didn't study abortion there very much. I studied a lot of things that were around abortion. They were about abortion in a lot of ways, because they're about how women control their lives and their futures and their families. I looked at infertility and how couples were making decisions around whether or not to pursue infertility treatments. I studied teen pregnancy and young parenthood to look at the ways that we stigmatize young motherhood and like how we can recenter the actual lived experiences of young mothers and how we talk about that. And I looked at adoption, which has really been the work that continues today. And I ended up at a research group, ANSWER, which is Advancing the Standards in Reproductive Health. It's part of the medical school at the University of California in San Francisco. I'm in the OBGYN department there. And ANSWER is a group of researchers who all one way or another, we study abortion in the United States. So it's multidisciplinary. We have a physician, we have some nurses, we have demographers, epidemiologists, public health scholars. I, of course, am a sociologist. And I think that having all those different disciplinary perspectives really gives a strength to our scholarship and understanding the number of ways that different policies and different court decisions are going to impact the lives of Americans across the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of, the kind of area of your work that has really continued and become kind of front and center is adoption. You are the author of Relinquished, the American Mothers Behind Infant Adoption. Can you tell us about this piece of work, how it came about, and really what your research came to find?
Yes. So it's coming about. My editor and my agent would probably like it to be more closer to coming about, but it's a work in progress. And so that will be coming out from St. Martin's Press, hopefully in the next year and a half, working on it as fast as I can. But this project is it's a book looking at the experiences of women who decide to give up their infants for private domestic adoption. So when the Supreme Court justices talk about how women have this option to give away their children and expect that their children will find safe home, what does that experience actually look like for the women who end up going down that path? And that's something that I have been studying now for over 10 years and really trying to understand what the long-term impacts are over their life course.
I was going to ask about private adoption. What does it mean for adoption to be private? Is there sort of a public option?
Yeah, there is. That's a good question, actually, because the two get conflated a lot. And I think it's really confusing for some people. Private adoption is what happens through agencies or individual attorneys, right? And public adoptions are effectively foster care adoptions or adoptions that are managed by the state, where the state has decided that they're going to terminate a parent's parental rights, right? In those cases, it's not the parent signing away their own parental rights. It's the state saying that they have a vested interest in severing that relationship. Now, whether or not they do is subject to a much bigger conversation.
Yeah.
It's complicated, to say the least.
It is. Yeah.
Well, we want to talk about women who are denied abortions. What percent really decides to go the adoption route? And really, what does that look like? And also, I'm so curious. I have so many questions. Is it also regional? Is there research and outcomes you found that in certain areas it's different versus others? Can you kind of walk us through what that really looks like?
Yeah, I would. Well, first, I wish that I had more answers to more of those questions that you just asked. There is no national tracking of adoption data in this country. Right. There is no national count of adoptions. There's no data. There's no central warehouse of data on who is adopted, what they look like, where they're coming from, what state they're born into. And so it's largely independent nonprofit organizations or adoption agencies that are collecting this data. Neither of those sources of data are perfect, right? So with all that, and I say this as as a researcher myself who has felt like I'm continually banging my head against the wall, why aren't these numbers available? And I'm constantly talking to my colleagues who are demographers who are yes, there are problems when the Centers for Disease Control report the number of abortions. There's some methodological problems there, and we're aware of them, and we use Guttmacher numbers too, right? But at least there's the starting point, right? We don't even really have that with adoption. So I've had to get pretty creative with how we sort of contextualize some of these findings. Right. But to get back to your bigger question about how does this factor in to women who are denied access to abortion? So what we found actually is that the vast majority of women who are denied access to abortion do not pursue adoption. They're not interested in it. So all of these women were denied access due to gestational age. They showed up at the clinic to get their abortion on that day, and they were beyond the limit at which the clinic could provide services or which the state would allow them to provide services. 91% of them who gave birth went on to parent that child whom they gave birth. So just 9%.
Wow.
So when we found this 9% number, my colleague, Diana Green Foster, who's the lead investigator for the Turnaway Study, right? And the Turnaway Study is a much bigger project looking at the implications for abortion denial. And so Diana has this book looking at, and the adoption question was really a much smaller piece of looking at what a denial of abortion means for women. When we found this 9%, Diana, and I were having a conversation. She's like, why is this number so low, right? She's looking at it as 100% of these women wanted to have an abortion. So why are 91% of them parenting? And I'm looking at it and comparing it to the 1% of American women who will ever make this choice, and like the 0.5% of American births that are relinquished annually. And I'm like, why is it so high, right? And I think what this shows is that adoption is enduringly a rare experience and has always been rarer than abortion, far rarer than parenting. But once you start constraining women's choices, you can get it meaningfully higher. And that's why when we look at modest differences in the options women have available to them and modest increases in their relinquishment and adoption placement rates, you're going to get a huge proportion increase in the amount of private adoption in this country.
That's so interesting. Why do a lot of women who are denied abortion access go to just, okay, I'm going to parent this child?
I think women just generally are not interested in giving away their children unless they really feel like they have to. And I think that there is something to be said for the idea that women who have abortions are not just trying to avoid parenting, they don't want to be parents, right? They're having an abortion because they're not interested in being pregnant and they don't want to be a parent. But I think for a lot of them, they're also just having an abortion because they're also not interested in adoption, right? The adoption is not a fallback plan. They are more interested in parenting than adoption because adoption is viewed as this separation that's really painful.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I think to that point, there are a lot of people that make the argument of, well, they can just put the kid up for adoption. That's whatever, it'll be fine, even though there's 9 months of potentially traumatic experience and so much more after that. But from your perspective, why do you find this argument to be, I would say, wildly problematic, in my opinion, but rife with issues?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, everything I'm going to say is going to put aside the fact that you are requiring women to continue a pregnancy that they have decided they didn't want to continue, right? Like, and that's a massive thing to just be like, we're just going to push that aside for now, because I think, like, and I'm not trying to dismiss that. I'm just like, because I want to, my expertise is on adoption and we'll focus on that. Like, that is already a violation. And I want to acknowledge that, even if we don't have time to like dive deeply into that. And I will say that Diana does get much further into that in the rest of the Turnaway Study scholarship and what that means to be forced to continue a pregnancy that you didn't want. But I think that what we find with adoption is that the women who end up relinquishing their child, they are most often interested in parenting, and they usually feel that they almost always feel that parenting is inaccessible to them. And this is whether or not they have considered or tried to get an abortion, right? So it might be that they try to get an abortion and then they move on to adoption right away because they don't feel like they have any access to parenting at that point. Or it could be that they are intending to parent throughout most of their pregnancies or a portion of their pregnancies, or hoping to parent, and then that becomes untenable for them.
Yeah.
And that's usually the tipping point. You have more relinquishing mothers who want to parent than want to have had an abortion. Adoption is not really anyone's first choice, right?
Right.
If abortion is inaccessible or illegal, it's a possible backup plan, but it's not even usually people's plan B, right? It's most people's plan C.
Yeah.
And if you want to parent and you feel like you don't have the resources or support to do that, then again, you will turn to adoption as the solution. At a point in pregnancy, where most women don't even have legal access to abortion anymore.
Mm-hmm. Due to Roe being overturned, do you guys expect to see more adoptions? What is your research telling you? What do you predict will happen on the adoption front?
So there's a lot of unknowns. It's hard to know how many women are actually going to be denied access to abortion, right? Prohibitively. The current best estimate that I've seen is about 13% of adoptions, which seems small, but is, over 100,000 American people who need abortion care. So if that number is accurate and our 9% is accurate, you're looking at about 9 to 10,000 additional adoption relinquishments per year. Now, when you talk about the fact that there are currently 850 to 900,000 abortions per year, right? This is a small number. It is about a 50% increase in the number of domestic adoption relinquishments. There's only about 18 to 22,000 every year for the last decade or so. Again, these are estimates. We don't actually have real numbers, right? But this would be both a comparatively small number of cases compared to the number of abortions that will still happen, certainly compared to the number of people that will be parenting as a result of abortion denial. But it will still be a large proportion increase in the rate of adoption.
Yeah. Is there, I don't know, the infrastructure in place to support that, would you say, the adoption?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I'm not worried about this, right? Because one thing I don't think people understand is that there are about 8 to, I've seen as high as 30 or 45 waiting families for every available infant right now. So in the Supreme Court brief, they cited a study from 2002 that said there were about 1 million American women who wanted to adopt a child, prospective adoptive mothers. That year, there were only 22,000 private domestic relinquishments, right? Some of there would have been more international adoptions too, but that's 45 to 1, right? If that number is even close to true, it's in that range. You have so many more families that are willing and wanting to adopt children than there are infants available, that it's just not going to be, that's not going to be the problem. What I'm actually concerned about is how women and pregnant people and the adopted children are treated when they're interacting with this system, right? That is my much bigger concern in this equation. I think private adoption agencies are probably going to be ready and eager for there to be more infants available. It's not taking them a lot to scale, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the system is serving people well.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because it can handle it doesn't mean it's doing a good job.
I would say that most agencies aren't doing a good job now with their current demands. So,
yeah.
Do you think there's a reason for that? Is it a funding issue? Is it just poorly organized? Is there anything that's a root cause there?
I think that people who participate in adoption provision just really believe adoption to be a social good, right? They think that they're doing a very good thing by facilitating these adoptions. And there's a history of this with adoption, under the most coercive of circumstances, right? When you look at these deeply abusive removals of Native American and Indian children from their families and their tribes to be sent to schools, this was effectively cultural genocide. Right. And I don't want to make excuses about good intention for most people involved. But when you look at the history of social work, there were a lot of people who were oh, this is going to be good for them, right? This is going to help them assimilate into white culture, and this is going to be good, right? When you look at the orphan trains that were managed in the latter half of the 19th century, this was a social welfare institution. They were going to ship all these poor children away from their families and send them out to the Midwest and offer them as free labor to these families. This is going to be great for them. This is viewed as a positive initiative, right?
Yeah, and that's pro-life movement is about too. It's them thinking they're doing this social good, and it's actually really harmful.
Yeah. And I think that the people involved truly believe that adoption is a good outcome. I don't think that is borne out in what we hear from the stories of relinquishing mothers and a lot of adopted people.
Well, moving to sort of the preparation for this. We were talking about this earlier of just how we knew this decision was coming for quite some time. But from a research perspective, how have you prepared for this decision to come to light? How has your research sort of been put into place to perhaps combat what we're now going to be dealing with?
Well, I will say a lot of these papers that I've tried to pull together in the last year, I was like, well, I need to get this out. I need to get these numbers together now. I need to get them published now because we need a Roe baseline, right, before this is overturned, right? So that's one thing that we've been working to do is what does adoption look like now? What are the rates? How do they compare to abortion rates? And who is relinquishing under what circumstances? What does that practice look like? That's a large part of what I have been trying to do as far as my research. Now, the Turnaway Study, was a big study, and started actually before I even finished graduate school, and has a lot going on. The intention was to respond to some claims that then Justice Kennedy had made in early Supreme Court decisions that sort of presumed that women would incur harm by having an abortion, right? That it would be harmful to them and their psyche in an enduring way. And effectively, what the Turnaway Study was designed was, is this true? Like, is abortion harmful to women? In comparison, not to women who don't get abortions or don't need or want abortions, in comparison to women who are denied the abortions that they do want, right? So if you have women who want to have abortions and you have a group that is within 1 week of the gestational limit and thus able to get their abortion. And then you have another group that is just over the gestational limit and thus unable to get their abortion. So they're only a handful of days different in their pregnancy. How does that then impact the rest of their lives? Right? You can't compare them to women who don't need abortions or who aren't at risk of unplanned pregnancy, right? Like, you have to look at what happens when they're denied the care that they want versus when they get the care that they want. And, what we found is that abortion denial is really enduringly detrimental to women, it is harmful to their economic outcomes. They have poorer relationships. They have weaker bonding with their children. They just do more poorly on almost every measure. And if the intention was to look at if abortion harmed women and their mental health, the answer was no, right? They do not do more poorly than the group that's denied care. And so that was sort of the body of work that we were trying to build towards. And then Diana and I kind of carved out, I was like, well, I need to look at adoption because that's sort of always my wheelhouse in our bigger research group. And I don't know that anyone anticipated that was actually going to be the piece. I mean, I didn't. That was the piece that the justices really latched onto. And it was my husband and I were listening to the oral arguments for Dobbs back in early December. And we're listening to Justice Coney Barrett ask all of these questions about private relinquishment and about what that means for women, and can't they just use safe havens? And, if families are available, doesn't that avert the burden of parenthood for these women? And my husband, he goes, I think you should maybe send out your book proposal. Like, maybe today you should do it. Yeah. But thank Justice Coney Barrett for my book that I'm trying to get out in the world as quickly as possible. But
thank her for something, I guess,
I mean, I don't know that I do, but ironically, at least, I think that it was surprising to a lot of people how big a part of the arguments that was, and the fact that played a role in the decision. And so that was actually the piece that ended up being cited in the dissent for the decision, was this piece that only 9% of women who are denied access to abortion relinquish, right? Women just are not interested in this. This is not their backup plan. The availability of families does not impact whether or not they feel they need abortion care. And so I think that was, I think getting that out in the world before this decision came down was important. I'm glad we did. But it does feel a little bit like you're just measuring how fast the Titanic is sinking sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So that's what I do on my political work to try to correct first, but that's separate.
Yeah. Well, we will definitely get into the political work as well. But before we do, we did want to talk about sort of the media element of this, because we know you've touched on that as well in your work, which I personally find so interesting, because the two of us are like marketers in our blood. Like, media marketing, we're like, oh my God, give us the fun facts. And So you've investigated really through the Abortion on Screen program, whether depictions of abortion in America, how they've sort of evolved over the years and also how that's impacted how people view it. And I'm just so curious, what have you found through that work? What are the general connections between, media portrayals and where the American public sort of lands? Is there also differences too in sort of that digestion of media and how, women feel about it or men? Are there layers to that?
Yeah, I mean, so this is the part of my job that is when I was talking about like you couldn't say that you wanted to have my job before I actually had it because like this wasn't a thing. That like I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to study how abortion is portrayed on television. It's when we started this program 10 years ago at this point, we sort of had we were like, let's look at TV, let's look at film and how they don't talk about abortion, and we'll write a paper. We'll talk about how there's nothing out there about abortion. There should be. And then that'll be one paper and that'll be done with it. And like 10 years later, I'm still studying this because, of course, what we found was that there is much more about abortion out there in American popular culture than we had anticipated. And that I think a lot of people realize. And when we started this was at the very end of 2012, and in the years since, we have seen just a huge increase in the amount of portrayals that we've seen. And I think that it's often interesting what really resonates with audiences. And I think it's important to understand that like viewerships aren't a monolith, right? And what could be really compelling and feel destigmatizing and exciting and interesting and entertaining to one group of viewers is going to be really alienating and jarring to another group that's not in the same place. And so I think what we've seen with the increase in stories is more stories meeting more people where they are in a way that's really important.
Do you think that the way that people look at abortion, be it people who think that in cases of incest, yes, people who have these kind of like tiers of how they support abortion access, do you think that that's, a marketing issue in a way that like women's health and abortion and even like sexual health is just not communicated, I guess, to the public in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it gets back to like my core hope of just like really centering the stories of impacted people.
Yeah.
Because actually one of the biggest audience impact findings that we had was on a documentary called After Tiller. And this looked at later abortion provision. It looked at third trimester abortion provision, which is, receives the lowest levels of public support. People are deeply uncomfortable with abortion at that gestational age. They don't understand what it is, right? They don't understand why women are getting abortions at that point in their pregnancy. They don't understand the doctors who do it, why they would do it. It feels uncomfortable to them. And after watching this film and seeing the stories of the women who need care at that point in their pregnancy, every viewer was almost more comfortable with third trimester abortion than they were with earlier abortion. And I think it's because the stories that they saw were so resonant, right? They view this as just like absolutely necessary for all the people in their care. And they view the doctors as so compassionate and working from such a place of care. And, they saw people making space for the mourning over needing to end an unwanted pregnancy, right? They saw the memory boxes that a lot of these providers put together with footprints and, the ashes after cremation for fetal remains, in some cases. And this is the loss for these people. Most of these, not all of them. Some women are getting abortions at this point in the pregnancy because they didn't realize they were pregnant until much later, or they didn't have enough money to afford an abortion earlier, so they needed to save up, and then they needed to try to access, then they needed to make an appointment, and then it was more money, and they needed to save up more, right? So it gets a little bit into this denial of care, this postponement of care that's really important. But people can even understand those reasons, right? The fetal anomalies are so heartbreaking that those stories are instantly sympathetic. I don't know who you'd have to be to not feel compassion for those cases. But when you see the cases of women having to get abortions later and later for all these other reasons, in the context of these other stories where people are just making the best choices that they can for themselves, for their families at that time, people get it. They get it. And I think that what that shows is when you really
tell people what abortion care looks like, when they understand the circumstances under which people need abortions, you can meaningfully move the needle on how they're feeling politically.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, speaking of politically, we do want to talk about your work with Emerge America. Can you give us the 4-on-1 on what you guys do?
Yeah, so I am on the board at Emerge America, which is the national organization. We have a bunch of statewide affiliates. We have Emerge California, Emerge Maryland. I've lost track of the exact number of states. We're in a lot of states across the country. And we also run boot camps for those states that we are not necessarily have a full affiliate in yet. And our goal is to train Democratic women who want to run for office to be ready and to provide them with a really powerful network that can propel them for their first run in office and beyond. We have 3 members of Congress right now, so we're really excited about that. And we're really, really proud of Deb Haaland from New Mexico. We trained her, we elected her to Congress in 2018, and now she's our first cabinet secretary. So we're still waiting for our first senator. We came fairly close last cycle. A lot of heartbreak across the country for what happened in Maine, but we're really excited about the work that our alums are doing. And I really believe in the power of electing women of the numeric majority. So younger women, single women, women of color, Native women. This is really our focus moving forward. And I should give a shout out to our president, Ashanti Golar, who has her own podcast, which is the Black Girls Guide to Politics.
Yes.
And people should definitely check out that because Ashanti is fantastic.
Yes, we're
Love
in
that
the Women's
podcast.
History Month playlist together. Love that.
I do have a question. I don't know if you'll know this stat or if this stat even exists, to be honest, but just got me thinking about women, or even not just women, but like candidates that end up losing, and how many of them then decide to run again, whether it's for a different position or the same one. Like, is there any stat that shows like, okay, they might lose the first time, but now it's launched their political career, so typically they do or typically they don't? Just curious if there's anything there.
I mean, I think I don't have hard numbers on that. We have our alums have a pretty high win rate for first-time candidates in office. And I think it's like 70%, right? I think that's extremely high for first-time candidates. And I also think that means that, a large chunk of our alums are not winning the first time or the second time. It's rare for a politician to win every office that they run for. And so a part of what we hope to do by building the network is give them the space to talk about what that means to lose and how you regroup and how you shift it and make a path ahead. I mean, I mentioned Deb Haaland. Deb lost for the first several offices. Deb lost the first several offices that she ran for, where she was elected congresswoman and then reelected congresswoman. And now she's the Secretary of the Interior. And that's not going to be the last office that Deb runs for. I'm going to do my best to make sure of that and to make sure that she has what she needs when she decides to leave this administration and return to New Mexico. So especially women need to have space to not view a loss as this is no longer my career. This is no longer work that I have to do. Now, running for office is not the only way to make an impactful difference in the world or even in politics, right? And I say to someone who has no intention of ever running for office and spends a massive amount of my time in American politics, right? I think it's important for everybody to kind of figure out what they want their lane to be and really jump into that, because I think it's important. And if you lose, then run again or find a different space, because we need all hands on deck.
Yes, politics is a long game. We're always talking about that. And it does take a few losses to ultimately get to your W. For those who are curious and wondering and scared and all the things right now about what's next when it comes to reproductive rights and access, can you give us either your idea of things are going to look like moving forward, but also just action items and things people can do and chip away at every day to hopefully get us back on track to, getting our reproductive rights back? And also just on that same front, if you have any resources of women who do need to seek an abortion in a place where they can't get one, is there places to look? I know we also have our brand ambassadors looking at a lot of them are college students and asked us if we have any resources to help their friends who are, some of them going into their first year in college and like don't know, can I even go to somebody in my school for, Plan B or birth control, or there's just so many questions out there. If you have any guiding light or advice for people on what's next and how to move forward.
I have some idea. I mean, first of all, there's so many unknowns. There's
Yeah.
a lot of unknowns right now. It's not gonna be great, right? I know that much, but like the exact contours of what's gonna happen state by state, a lot of that will depend on who wins what gubernatorial races in November. A lot we don't know.
Yeah.
But as far as your listeners who are trying to figure out like how the resources that they need to keep them and their friends safe, one of my favorite resources is ineedana.com. And if you do think that you're pregnant and you need an abortion, you can go in there and you can enter your zip code. You can enter the date of your last menstrual period, and you can enter your age, because for women who are under 18, there might be additional barriers to access. And it'll tell you your closest clinics. It'll tell you your abortion funds that can help you pay for an abortion. It'll give you links to online pharmacies if you're still eligible for medication abortion that you can get shipped to your house and take that via telemedicine. That's not available in every state. They'll help you with your digital bypass if you're under 18 and you need access to that. And so it really gives you a little bit of a roadmap for what you're going to need to do to access care. Plan C Pills gives you sources where you can order medication abortion pills. 8 Access, you could actually order the pills and they'll ship, and they can do advanced provision. So if you want to have some on hand, you can have that on hand. It's important to remember that medication abortion is like as safe as Tylenol. This is not a really dangerous, risky drug. And having some on hand in your medicine cabinet is not that big of like it's not like you're carrying around an incredibly dangerous drug all of the time. 8 Access does take a while to ship. It ships from overseas. And so for people who are like 8 weeks pregnant and they need the pills right now, or 10 weeks pregnant and they need them right now, that might be too late. So a good reason to have them on hand in case you or someone needs them. What else? Plan B is always good to have on hand. It's important to remember that Plan B is emergency contraception. You have to take it as soon as possible after unprotected sex. Plan B uses efficacy as women's weight goes up. So if you're over 150 pounds, you might want to talk to your OB or your provider about whether or not the dosing of the Plan B is going to be sufficient contraception for you at that point.
Oh, that's interesting.
Plan B prevents a pregnancy. Medication abortion ends a pregnancy. Medication abortion, 2 pills, mifepristone, misoprostol, they are not weight sensitive. They'll work at any weight, right? So that you don't need to worry about. But the contraception part, you should be conscious of that. That's important for your listeners to know. I would also encourage them to not necessarily feel they need to reinvent the wheel. If they are really concerned about this, there's all these camping networks on Facebook now. If you want to go camping in my state, come visit anytime. We have abortion funds across this country that do incredible work. They often need practical support volunteers to help drive people to clinics, to help with childcare in a lot of cases, just to make it more easier for people to get to their abortions. And so I do think that, if any of your listeners really want to get involved, I would contact the local abortion fund and see if they're looking for volunteers to answer the hotline, to provide practical support, to help with fundraising. A lot of these organizations are small, volunteer run, reliant on grassroots donations. And, I volunteered with an abortion fund when I was in graduate school. It's just really great, important work. So.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Absolutely. I also think besides that it's great, important, everyone should do it, all of that. That is a great resume builder too. If you are looking in college to build your resume out and also do something very important, that's a great way to do it. Love that.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
All right. Well, to wrap things up, we do want our listeners to know where to find you, where to find your work, all that jazz. Can you guys, wow, am I well? Can you give us the 411 on where everyone can find you and your work?
I'm gonna be the embarrassing millennial on this podcast, because I don't have a TikTok. I don't have a public Instagram that I really engage with. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter is GE Sisson, my last name, so GESISSON. And I also have a Substack, which is just my first name, Gretchen.substack.com. And that is really all politics all the time. And I will mostly telling people where to spend their money on politics, which races, which candidates, which organizations I think are doing really great work. And I will say that any candidate that I mention or any organization that I mention, I am usually funding. I am usually putting my own money behind. So, and I do try to give opportunities for people to give their time too if they don't have a lot of money to give, but also just a sense of like which races are actually flippable, what's actually where we actually need to be paying attention if we want to be making a difference in our government. So that's where to find me.
Super important stuff. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else learned a lot, and we appreciate your time and you answering all our questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Top stories of the week. Let's talk about the January 6th hearings because we haven't talked about it much, and that is very much still happening even amongst everything else that's happening. Some recent activity around these hearings, and especially around some news that's breaking today, because there's just like some tea that I'm just happy to talk about. So basically, former President Donald Trump was so irate that he wasn't being driven to the Capitol following his speech on the Ellipse on January 6, 2021, that he attempted to grab the steering wheel of his limousine and lunge at a member of his Secret Service detail. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified in a House hearing Tuesday, citing the account of a senior-ranking colleague. He said, Trump quoted, Trump quote, sorry, coming in hot.
Oh.
He goes, quote, "I'm the fucking president. Take me to the Capitol now." Hutchinson, a former aide to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, quoted Trump as saying in testimony to the House Select Committee. She also described an outburst by Trump at his former attorney general in which he threw dishes, leaving ketchup streaming down the wall.
Which honestly really checks out to me because like all that guy eats is fast food. So
no, 100% it was McDonald's.
Him being,
What else do people need to know on this Hutchinson testimony that is honestly, I think, happening as we speak? But here are some of the tea that's coming out.
Yes. All right. So Hutchinson also testified that Trump was informed that attendees at a Jan 6 rally, aka the insurrection, near the White House were armed, wanted security removed from the area, and wanted the crowd to march to the Capitol. Trump waved off concerns that rallygoers, quote-unquote rallygoers, had been reported to be armed with rifles, pistols, knives, brass knuckles, and other weapons. Hutchinson recalled earlier in her testimony that Meadows told her days before January 6, 2021, insurrection, that things might get real bad. Wait, why does that sound like to me like
all of
bad
this is
to the bone?
All of this is a movie, and I need them to make a movie, honestly, about the Trump administration. Honestly, would be great, but like this time exactly, like election to January 6th, I want a movie, and I don't know who is going to play Trump, but like that is, oh my God, who is going to play Trump?
Well, you know what? I think, okay, if democracy survives,
sure.
Little detail. But if it does, I think it'll be to the same vibe as Watergate, where they did make a movie. Like, I think it definitely will be. But I don't think it'll be for like if democracy survives like 10 years. So I feel like even us trying to pick the actors right now.
Well, Alec Baldwin did a pretty good Trump, but like that was SNL Trump. So like I need like a Hollywood like Oscar vibe for Trump, and I'm not sure who that would be, but I want to table this conversation and definitely come through maybe next week in our intro. We'll talk about our ideal casting for January 6th movie.
Wait, dying.
If you guys have any suggestions, DM us or comment or do the things that you know to do to contact us.
Carrier pigeon. I have a lot of them around here, so.
Yeah. Speaking of pigeons.
Also, Hutchinson. Let's get back to Hutchinson. Yeah. Wait, I fucked up. Guys, I'm so sorry. I thought we had more Hutchinson, but we actually have Benny G. Thompson. So, my bad. Anyways, this particular representative, Democrat from Mississippi, committee chairman, opened the hearing by saying it would focus on details of what transpired in the office of the White House Chief of Staff just steps from the Oval Office as the threats of violence became clear. This literally, sorry, again, movie sounds like some medieval whatever. Anyways, during the hearing, Trump posted on social media, "I hardly know who this person, Cassidy Hutchinson, is, other than I heard very negative things about her." Like, what the? Like,
He's literally like live tweeting on Truth Social saying that he has no idea who this woman is, who is like a very close aide to him and his team. Like, he is so unhinged. It's unbelievable. Also, speaking of Truth Social, I do want to give a shout out to my governor, Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom is on Truth Social spreading truths about the Republican Party, and it's just really kind of iconic of him. The clapbacks and the memes that he's throwing out there are pretty, again, iconic. I'm surprised he hasn't been removed.
It's a really good example of someone, aka a Democrat, actually trying to beat Republicans at their own game by meeting them where they are and also using their own tactics against them. So
yeah. Wait, I just want to paint this picture too of the ketchup on the wall. There is a picture to be painted. So Hutchinson, she said, I remember hearing noise coming from down the hallway, so I poked my head out of the office, she said. I saw the valet walking towards our office. He had said, quote, get the chief down to the dining room. The president wants it. No, this is like, it's already getting an Oscar in my book. Hutchinson said when she returned, she noticed the valet changing the tablecloth on the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantel on the TV where I first noticed the ketchup dripping down the wall. And there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor, she said. I feel like I'm reading a children's book. She said the valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the attorney general's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall and was causing them to have to clean up, Hutchinson added. So I grabbed a towel and started wiping. The ketchup off the wall to help the valet out. You work in the White House and you're wiping ketchup off the wall because you have an really unhinged boss.
That, you know, in the 21st century, you wear many hats at your jobs, and this is no exception. No exception.
That is the, testimony that happened when we're speaking right now. It's Tuesday, but yesterday for you Wednesday listeners. But I do also want to just address, in all seriousness, what we can expect from these hearings, because I think people are like, okay, great, this is hilarious. This is like the next, the movie that's going to come out in a couple years and get the Oscar. But what does it mean politically? The Justice Department, not Congress, is the only entity that could bring criminal charges against Trump or his allies. So the committee really gathers evidence and investigates potential crimes as well as makes criminal referrals to the Department of Justice, but lawmakers cannot themselves charge anyone with a crime. So again, the DOJ is gonna be the ones to potentially charge Trump with anything. So this again is a moment to investigate, gather evidence, and such, and especially for the public to see what's happening and to garner a lot of public opinion around the issue. Moving on to our next story, primaries. There are more primaries this week. Illinois, Oklahoma, Mississippi has runoff, Colorado, New York. So going through kind of like where most eyes are looking this primary week. So we'll kick it off with Illinois' 15th district, Republican primary. So this race between Rep. Rodney Davis and Mary Miller attracted national attention over the weekend when Miller hailed the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe versus Wade as a victory for white life. So you might have seen this video, went a little viral, and yikes is all I have to say. And so Miller's team says the first-term lawmaker who in 2021 said Hitler was, quote, was right on one thing and meant to say right to life. What? Like, I just can't.
No.
Yeah. Trump endorsed Miller and campaigned with her at a rally in rural Illinois over the weekend. Davis has a more moderate deal-making reputation on Capitol Hill, and Davis is the top Republican on the House Administration Committee and has served in Congress since 2013. But yeah, this was super problematic. Again, you probably saw it over the weekend, the video. If you haven't, go watch. It's atrocious in every way. They did backpedal and say it was a slip-up, but it was not. It was
Just
not.
it's not. Like,
yeah, it's just not.
And that is coming from the person over here that literally cannot get a phrase right and for her damn life.
I can't pronounce a single name, and I know that wasn't a slip up.
Yeah.
So even if it was a slip up, that's what's in your brain. White life.
Right.
That's the point. Yeah.
That's the part. Okay, 6th district. Going on to the 6th district. Today's other, aka Tuesday's, other member-on-member primary features Democratic reps Sean Kyrsten and Mary. Oh my God. See, speaking of which, Marie Newman, I was about to call her Mary, and it's clearly Marie. Anyways, Samantha Lee. Newman, who is the subject of an investigation by the Office of Congressional Ethics, is endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus PAC. Democratic Majority for Israel PAC is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads backing Kyrsten because Newman is one of Congress's most vocal pro-Palestinian supporters and notably voted with the squad in 2021 to oppose U.S. funding for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. I really do wonder what's going to happen with that particular race. I mean, I wonder if with all of them, but that one particularly, I think it'll be interesting. Do we do 7th district? Do we go to the 7th district of Illinois? I think we do.
Let's do it. Illinois, we're coming for you. 7th district, Democratic primary. Justice Democrats backed candidate Keena Collins is challenging longtime Chicago Rep Danny Davis from the left in the 7th district primary. So national progressives are excited about Collins' chances against the 80-year-old incumbent. Fuck, why is he 80? God damn it. Who's been in Congress for over a quarter century. I'm so glad they worded it as a quarter century. Like, that hits so much different than 25 years, saying 25 years. So I'm just glad that they said over a quarter century, just because we needed that dramatic effect. Anyways, leading House Democrats in caucus Chair Hakeem Jeffries have traveled to campaign for Davis. Davis also boasts the endorsement of President Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Congressional Black Caucus PAC. 3rd district, Illinois, Democratic primary. Next one.
Okay. I will hold my commentary.
Oh, okay.
The matchup between state rep Delia Ramirez and Chicago. Wow. Okay, guys, we got it. Alderman Gilbert Villegas. That can't be right.
Just go.
Right. Has pitted national progressive and moderates against each other. The two are main contenders for the open Chicago seat. Ramirez has the backing of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and the CPC PAC. That's the progressive one we were talking about before. Villegas, who pro-Ramirez forces have attacked as a corporate lobbyist, is endorsed by more center-left Democratic figures. So basically what we have is a progressive versus non-progressive situation.
Mm-hmm. Last one here in Illinois we're going to highlight is the Republican race for governor, and Darren Bailey Farmer, endorsed by former President Donald Trump over the weekend, wants to end the state's right to abortion except for instances in which the mother's life is in danger. Wow, it's so nice of him. He doesn't support exceptions for rape or incest. His opponent, Richard Irvin, the first Black mayor of Aurora, said he would allow abortions in instances of rape, incest, or when the mother's life is at risk. So sweet of them.
Thank you so much for that, Olive Branch. Okay.
Laugh through the pain. Speaking of pain, Mississippi.
Scream. Okay, so 3rd district Republican primary runoff. Love a runoff. Okay, retired Navy pilot Michael Cassidy narrowly beat incumbent Rep. Michael Guest in the June 7th primary, but neither candidates broke 50%, aka the 50% threshold needed for a distinct win.
Let's move to New York. Samantha, take us away.
New York. All right. Well, we have 2 primaries in New York. FYI, this is the June 28th. We got another one August 23rd. Nonetheless, today's big focus will be the governor's race. So Governor Kathy Hochul is looking to fend off a challenge from her right by Representative Tom Suozzi, who we've also had on the show. So go listen to that episode. Not just because of this particular race, but we actually talk more about his current seat in Congress, which includes a position on the Ways and Means Committee and what that actually means. Nonetheless, Suozzi is trying to portray Hochul as soft on crime. The sitting governor, who's also facing New York City public advocate Jermaine Williams in the primary, remains the strong favorite. I would be shook if Hochul didn't end up pulling. No hate to either of these 2 other candidates. I think they're both great in other ways as well. On the Republican side, we've got Representative Lee Zeldin, who I saw more than enough signs for out in the Hamptons this weekend, is the favorite to capture the GOP nomination. He faces a number of candidates, including Andrew Giuliani, the son of the former mayor. We are somehow still on their PR list. Don't understand it. I'm telling you.
The former mayor, the former just Rudy Giuliani.
Slob kebab. He's a slob kebab. That is what he is. Okay, 100%. Colorado. Let's get into it.
Colorado. In Colorado's Republican U.S. Senate primary, voters are choosing between a businessman, Joe Odea, and state rep Ron Hanks. Odea backs a ban on late-term abortions, but is otherwise the rare Republican who supports most abortion rights. Hank backs a ban on the procedure in all cases. Classic. So that's that. Elections are being held in Oklahoma, Utah, New York, Nebraska, Mississippi, and South Carolina today. This marks the final round of multi-state primary nights until August, when closely watched races for governor and U.S. Senate will unfold in states such as Arizona, Wisconsin, Florida, and Missouri. Speaking of Florida, and speaking of congressmen who we've had on the show who are running for governor, Kyrsten. He's running for governor in Florida, and he's polling above Ron DeSantis by a point. And, you know, we love him so much. And he, you know, said that he will repeal all these abortion bans that Ron DeSantis has been pushing. And we got to get behind Charlie Crist. He is the one that said we are saving America. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
so.
Look, he knew where a compliment was gonna help, and he did get us. He got us on that. But also, in all fairness, while we do not endorse, we do very distinctly recommend looking at his platform and looking at what is ahead in Florida. So
when
that
it
is
comes between him and Ron DeSantis, Madison Medved endorses Charlie Crist. Also, just for news, obviously we know the Supreme Court is doing their business because of Roe being overturned, but there are also a lot of Supreme Court cases that decisions have come out about that we don't have time to run through today, but we'll make a TikTok. How about that?
We will. We will
cool.
TikTok.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Again, action items in our intro, run through, you know, what to do in this very scary time. Hang in there. Still make sure to have some balance in addressing this issue and fighting back so that you can have the stamina and the endurance for the long game of this fight. Sign up for our brand ambassador program. We are continuing the conversation there. We also have our brand ambassadors planning some initiatives on helping college girls and college women around this issue of reproductive rights and access. So we're doing it in the brand ambassador program. So go sign up at girlinthegov.com, and that's that on that. But thank you for listening, and we'll be talking to you all next Wednesday.